There we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar channel of the Association of Certified eDiscovery Specialists. My name is Mike Quateraro. I'm the president of ACEDS. We are joined today by our fantastic friends, our partner, Nuix, for a webinar entitled Unlocking the Potential of AI in Legal Discovery. You can learn more about Nuix at nuix.com. Please visit their site. Before we get started, please know we love questions. You can submit your questions in the chat through the Q&A, however you want to get to us. And we'll get to them as we have time. If we don't get your questions, we'll try to get answers to you post-webinar. Also, if you'd like a copy of the slide deck, I believe it'll be available somewhere on the screen in the resources tab, I believe. So there you have it. All right. I think I covered the housekeeping. Let's get into it without further delay. I am super excited to introduce David Stromberg from Nuix, who will take the presentation from here. David, please take it away.
Great, thank you, Michael. A couple of things. So my name's David Stromberg, and I'll go ahead and do quick introductions here in a second. But today we're going to talk about benefits and trends of AI, types of AI, and then responsible AI. And as far as introductions goes, so my name is David Stromberg. I've been in the legal industry. I fell into it 20 years ago, and I'm also joined today by Chris Stevenson. So my background is I started on the project management side, managing cases. I moved to the consulting side, and then roughly 10 years ago, I moved to the software side. Chris Stevenson, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, David. My name is Chris Stevenson. I'm the head of AI strategy and operations for Nuix. My background is 35 years in information technology, cutting my teeth in IT support. Getting into, I caught the bug on AI entrepreneurship and haven't looked back. And so look forward to a great presentation and discussion today. Awesome.
So I'm going to try to set the stage here before we get into the details. So I want to make sure that if there's pieces and parts that you're not aware of, that I sort of build you up to where we are today. So just at a very high level. So why do we need AI in legal discovery? Well, we've been working with technologies such as review for quite a while to solve these issues. One is just the scale with data growth, right? We don't have the ability to look at every single document. It's too costly, too expensive, right? So we've had to use technology in order to overcome basically the burden of too many documents, right? And part of what we're trying to do is reduce the labor, right? We're no longer having, reviews with 500 reviewers that last, a year long, and people just aren't willing to wait for those delays. So we need to respond faster. The expectation is that we do that. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring back a higher recall. Recall meaning we're trying to bring back more of what we're looking for. And in terms of false positives, we're trying to reduce the number of false positives or the junk that comes back when we retrieve information. And that's how AI can help us. In terms of the data growth, the data problem just keeps getting bigger. I'm sure that you've seen slides like this, and we've had conversations like this, year after year for the last 15 years, but it's not going away. We have to continue to invest in advanced technologies in order to keep up with the amount of data that's being created on the corporate side. In terms of things that are influencing, and challenges that we're facing today, I would say that, that we just have heightened concerns about regulations, about data privacy. We need to come up with better methods to reduce the data down to just the data that we need to see and keep the other data protected. In terms of, the impact of new AI. So I'm jumping to the conclusion, and I'm doing that intentionally because I want you to understand the potential of what's out there. And I say potential a lot in this slide deck because we're at this great influx of new technology that's going to change the way that we work, but we don't exactly know how that's going to play out. We have some beliefs in how it may play out, but as you know, we had beliefs about how technologies to review 1.0 and 2.0 would play out. Some of that happened, some of it didn't happen, right? And we're at this influx of new tech where we believe we understand what's going to happen. And so, we're talking about potential, what things could happen. And we're talking about in terms of the new technology, sort of the new hotness. So the potential impact to eDiscovery, there's a huge potential impact to hosting. And the reason why is that these technologies can be used upstream. And what that means is that to the left of the eDRM, so at the identification, at the collection stage, there's the potential to reduce the data by 10 times. And I know that that sounds like a huge amount, but if you think about how much data is actually used in eDiscovery once you've done your document review and how much is left over, it's a huge quantity. We're sending huge amounts of data downstream into hosted review platforms that just sits there, and they're not used in the case, they're not turned over to the other side. So that's the potential. In terms of technologies that are needed to make this happen, we see a need for investment in an end-to-end eDRM system. And the reason why is that we have to overcome a number of obstacles that impacted our ability to have a system that works like this. If we're going to have decisions being made to the left of the spectrum, we need to be able to interact with the right, correct? So that people can ask the questions and understand the data and understand what the precision and recall is of what we're treating. And to do that, you're going to have synchronization between what's happening in review and the corporate system in order to basically move decisions back and forth and get a good outcome. And what's interesting is if you look at the eDRM model with the arrows circling back and forth, that's exactly what it's saying that we should be doing. That it's not like this is completely new ground that we're talking about. We're talking about actually implementing the vision that we've had for a fairly long time. So in terms of where we're at today, so our current state right now is that corporations are focused mostly on preservation, hold, collection, and transfer of data. I spoke with an expert. He's in charge of eDiscovery for a Fortune 10 company. And when he talks to his friends and who don't know the eDiscovery industry, and he describes what he does for a living, he says that I copy files. This is somebody who's an expert. He's a leader. And he says, I copy files. And the reason why is that that's what the focus is. That's where the effort is. There's so much eDiscovery work in major corporations that they're just focused on the minutia of moving data back and forth, right? Because that's a huge tracking exercise. It's a huge collection exercise, right? That's what their focus is. And what happens downstream is the processing, the AI, the review, and the production. And that's where that work is happening outside of the corporate firewall. The potential future state is to do the AI inside the corporation, to index the data in place and ask the questions of the system to find that the smaller data set and then move that downstream. And that affects costs downstream, hosting costs. It affects the quality of the data that you're going to use downstream for further types of AI, like Gen AI, and doing things like telling stories, or that the quality of the data that you send downstream is going to affect the ability of those systems to provide good results. And so not only do we have a cost savings potential for the corporation, but we also have additional savings that can happen downstream in terms of how you apply the additional technology and how you use that technology and how well that technology works, frankly. But again, to do that, we have to have a system that synchronizes, that talks, right? So I've talked about AI in general. I haven't talked about specifics, but we'll get into that just here in a second. So today, in terms of where we're at, so we went through technology history 1.0, which was simple active learning or simple passive learning. Today, most companies that I've talked to are using continuous active learning or some sort of reinforced learning, right? That's what they're using today. And then we have TAR 3.0, and I have a question mark here because I don't know what TAR 3.0 is going to be. It could be a combination of technologies. It could be that we're doing semantic search and we're feeding results into continuous active learning through seeding. It could be that we're using natural language processing to enhance continuous active learning. It could be that we're using retrieval augmented generation to pull back the data sets directly with prompts, right? It could be that we're using types of generative AI to actually generate the types of queries that we want to run, right? All of these are possibilities, but I would say that none of it has been necessarily been experimented with at the level needed in live data to know what TAR 3.0 is. We don't know what the optimal solution is. What we do know is we have technology being thrown at the problem, And that will tend to resolve itself once we bring experts in and we get more experience with it. So I'm going to go through very quickly at a high level. I want to make sure that people know what the difference is between these technologies. TAR 1.0, which we were dealing with SAL or simple passive learning. The main difference here is that we trained a model separate from review. So we had an expert that took a look at documents, they used samples, there's different sampling methods that can be used, but effectively they interacted with the data, they trained the model, and then once they were happy with the model, they scored the documents, and then they handed off the documents over to reviewers. And there's actually very good things with this. I was able to, 15 years ago, achieve, 90% recall, 80% precision plus precision in a case with TAR 1.0, right? Using a product that's no longer commercially available called Quivio. And it was fantastic. But there are issues with TAR 1.0. And some of the issues that we had was that it's hard to get all of the data up front. Right, our population changes through the course of litigation, which means I have to go through this process repeatedly or do some level of validation to understand that the model that I built, the data against, that data is representative of a larger population. The other issue is that the technology tends to not work well against low prevalence. So if I have a large amount of data and I drop below a certain percentage of documents that were actually responsive in the data set, it tended to not find those, right? It couldn't find the needles in the haystack. And so what happened is that, there's different methods that you would try to get it to act better, but the result was that sometimes you just couldn't get the result that you wanted from TAR 1.0. So we moved to TAR 2.0, which is continuous active learning, which is a type of reinforced learning. When we talk about reinforcement, we're talking about basically the reviewer is training the document. So reviewer reviews the documents that they've reviewed, train the model, documents are rescored, more documents are sent to the reviewer, repeat, right? That's the cycle. Now this workflow worked really well for legal, and that's what we've been using primarily, since TAR 1.0, is we've switched to this. And the reason why is it works well from a workflow perspective, it deals with low prevalence, but there are some issues with it, right? You have to review more documents is the primary issue. But there's benefits to having eyes on documents, right? And then I want to talk about the next thing, which is that, whenever we have new technologies come out, there's the opportunity to actually take an existing technology and improve it. Like people will relook at it and say, okay, are we getting everything that we can out of Cal? I can tell you that we're not. The industry has taken a very generalist approach to machine learning. And the reason why is that we don't know what data is going to go in through the system. So we have to have a generalist approach that works against most data. That doesn't mean that it's getting the best results against a specific type of data. And so in machine learning, it's very common to build a model to enhance that model by doing things like seeding the data, which we talked about earlier, like here's some examples, or adding features, right? You may talk to your custodians and you may find out that they were having conversations about a particular issue, but those conversations were happening either in a particular document type, or maybe it was at particular times. It was happening outside of business hours. So you can add in features, you can weight those features, and basically your Cal or even your SAL models, you can get improved results. So you can improve your precision in recall, because that's sort of the other side issue with Cal and SAL is that the precision and recall aren't actually as good necessarily as TAR 1.0, but it overcame some of the other deficiencies. But that doesn't mean that we can't do more tuning, more tweaking to actually get Cal and SAL better. And so I expect that other platforms will add it. We added some tuning and the ability to do these features into our platform, our review platform, I think like 3 or 4 years ago, but they're not extensively used because the result was frankly good enough. But as we start comparing technologies, I could see that there's going to be more interest in that. And it also gives the ability to add new technologies and new features maybe that are coming from large language models, based like NLP type technology into improving that performance. So in terms of new AI, which I'm sure is what a lot of people are interested in hearing about, what is it? So every single company, from what I can tell from both their marketing and from just conversations that I've had with people who've had a look, everybody is doing the same thing. We're all headed down the same path. Nuix is headed down the same path as well. And where we're headed is what's called retrieval augmented generation. So, I want to make sure that you know what the technical name is. Every company is going to have their own marketing name for what their AI is, and but it's important for you guys to know what it is that we're doing and what it's doing underneath the hood, and things you should be concerned about and things that you shouldn't be concerned about. So I want you to know what it is. If you have a chance, write this down. Go do a Google search, watch a 20-minute YouTube video. You'll learn plenty, because it's not just the legal industry that's doing this. It's every single industry. This right here is the new hotness in AI across the board. And there's a reason why. So basically I have a user input, you'll see that on the left, that's interacting with a semantic index, that's interacting with a large language model. So let's say that I have a user input that goes directly to our large language model. If you've used, any sort of, like a chat GPT, you've submitted a request, you get back information that sometimes is really good. Sometimes it's not true at all, right? There's issues with it. And what those issues are called, it's called hallucinations, right? I can ask it for something and it will give me a response, but it might make the response up. And so one of the things that you have, if the user goes directly to a large language model, is you're going to have basically bad information coming back. That's not something that we want. But if you use a semantic index in this process, what you're doing is you're grounding that large language model to the data in the semantic index. So now you're basically reducing those hallucinations, right? You're improving basically the semantic index by using the large language model for your retrieval. So that's the new hotness in terms of what people are doing, regardless of whatever marketing name they have on it. So what's a semantic index? Just at a very high level, information, so images, documents, and audio is translated into numbers, right? Your query is also translated into numbers, and your query, the numbers generated from your query, are used to search that vector index and see how close it is to those things. It allows you to do some pretty cool things. You'll notice that I have images, documents, and audio, right? So it's different types of data that today you might be searching for with different types of tools. But in semantic index, you can do things like search for an apple, and you can return back things that are keyword apple. But you'll also return back things that are talking about just an iPhone, but there's no mention of an apple. You'll also return back pictures of an iPhone and pictures of an apple. And maybe you'll also get a picture of Isaac Newton. I'm not sure, right? If it's in the data set. But the point is that you can basically retrieve information in a way that we just haven't been able to do historically. And it's really amazing technology on its own, right? Standalone, even without an LLM involved, right? So when we involve basically an LLM and we do retrieval augmented generation, it just gets better, right? We have more information. We have, if you're using something like an OpenAI, you basically have the internet that's been used to build that language model that just improves the quality of that search. And that's really what it is. And the other thing that it solves for us is that you're not using your corporate data to train the LLM, right? You're feeding vectors, you're feeding numbers into the LLM, and you're getting vectors and information back. So you're not doing anything that is going to cause an issue from like a security standpoint or compliance standpoint. You're not basically going to be releasing your IP into ChatGPT for somebody to then query on. So that's what the new hotness is. And so the question that I posed in the beginning is how what can happen in terms of that retrieval happening on the far left, right? And so when we talk about the retrieval on the far left, we don't have to actually do an extraordinary job to hit a 10 times improvement. So I just want to walk through an example. So let's say that I had 1 million documents. And in today's workflow, I sent those 1 million documents all the way to the review platform. And somebody ran cal on the data set. And basically we figured out that there's, roughly 50,000 documents that are actually relevant that we're looking for. If I could run a query on the far left, and I could say, okay, I want to, here's a bunch of prompts, which is kind of, you can think about it almost like search terms 2.0, because you're running a bunch of queries, right? But if I run a bunch of prompts and I'm able to retrieve a set of data that is, let's say, 90% recall, 90% of the responsive documents are coming back, I only actually have to hit a precision of about 50% to have a 10 times reduction in data that's going to the far right. It's actually not a big ask, which means that I don't have to do sort of the extensive review. What I can do is I can do my prompts on the far left. I can say, in my trade-off, I could say, I want 90% recall, and I'll get whatever precision I get at that recall level. It could be that I get 40, it could be that I get 60, right? It depends on how good of the prompts that I wrote. But the point is that I'll save a whole lot of money and a whole lot of effort downstream of copying files. And so that's really where the savings is going to come into. And it's also a workflow that people are comfortable with, right? People are comfortable with submitting searches. People are comfortable with submitting prompts. I think that that's just a natural evolution of how the user is going to interact with the system. And I feel like this is actually the point where a corporation is going to take a look at this technology and say, yeah, I'm comfortable with doing that. I've been doing searches behind the firewall for a long time to find data. Like this is an extension of what I currently am comfortable doing, and I can see a direct cost benefit, and it reduces my risk. So that's basically where I believe that we're headed with this. Is this going to be called TAR 3.0? I don't know, right? I think that will flesh out over time. But what I'd like to do now is I'd actually like to turn it over to Stephen so we could talk about the other side of this, which is sort of the ethics and the trends in AI. Sorry, Chris, go ahead and take it away.
Sure, yeah, sorry. Thanks, David. One thing to point out is just to take a quick step back on the semantic indexing that you were speaking of, because I think that's a fascinating technology, is that you don't even need to engage if there are challenges with or either technical challenges, ethical challenges, whatever it might be, with including LLMs or generative technologies. Semantic index allows you to do some very cool things like searching an entire data set or your entire data set specifically using phrases, full documents to find more things like this. So find me all of my NDAs, or find me every document that may contain this phrase or something that's similar to this phrase. So you can do these really cool searches without even having to go to generative at that stage and get some really cool outcomes that dramatically help you reduce your data sets before they go into review. So again, as you pointed out, that next level, whatever that TAR 3.0 is, it could be a mix and match, it could be combinations, it could be one or the other. And the jury's still out on which way that's going, but I thought it was important to point that out because it's a dramatic shift from the regex and keyword searching that we're used to in the past, but it doesn't need to go all the way to generative in order to get those really interesting outcomes. So with that, I will jump in here on the AI side. I think David has explained well the nature of AI in eDiscovery and where that's going. I find this entire topic absolutely fascinating, and I'll explain why. And it starts with this slide. So there are many trends that we can talk about in AI, but I've touched on a few here. The first and foremost is AI governance. And one of the key things about this across markets, across companies, across the globe, one of the biggest trends in AI is this need to get a hold of it, to handle the personal privacy, the security of data, and the trust that is built from that. And I think you're going to hear me talk about that word trust many times during this presentation, because at the core of data privacy, data security, and the integrity of what we're doing is, and of course, AI plays a huge role in this, is establishing trust. As far as data centricity goes, effectively, data is the fuel of AI. And so if you think about it, the importance should be placed more on the data than even on the algorithms and models, because the algorithms and models will change. They will be tweaked as things change. The data at the core of those is the most important when you think about bias mitigation, risk, privacy information. The key is understanding that data, the data provenance, oversight of it, the security of it, and so on. Julian Simon, the chief evangelist for Hugging Face from the AI community, Hugging Face, made a great statement when he said, don't fall in love with your models, fall in love with your data. And what he really meant by that was this thing about data acuity, if you will, this notion of understanding your data, taking care of it, and making sure that you have a solid handle on it. That goes from both building models, but it also goes for your IG, your information governance. So that's a huge trend in AI as well. Generative, as David touched on, is a massive change in the market. Let's say over the last 18 months or so, what we've seen is with companies like OpenAI and Google, generative technologies hold a lot of promise, but also touching on that governance, data centricity, and trust element raises a lot of challenges, ethical challenges, regulatory challenges as well around data privacy, around copyright. And so how to balance that need to embrace this new technology, but also do it in a thoughtful way is really sort of that careful balance. And what's fascinating about that is I find legal to be at the center of that, that space. So the folks on this call and the folks putting this on, ACEDS and the surrounding communities, from the legal community have a special focus on this area and a special talent for it that I'll touch on a little bit. And then, of course, this interpretability and tunability. I think this notion of control is going to be key to establishing trust, comfort level with the data, defensibility of the output of AI. It comes down to the level of human control that you get from this. And this is what leads to my, you can go back one slide, David. It goes to this notion of the rise of legal AI, this sort of combination of advanced AI with the rapidly emerging regulations that are coming at us, is putting the legal community and the eDiscovery community in the white hot spotlight. So look for AI legal expertise to become sort of the new thing. I think it's replacing, it's putting the IT as in the back seat and really taking center stage here as the center of the IT universe right now, because it's so crucial to everything that we do. Most of what I've seen on LinkedIn written about AI, a lot of the best stuff has come from the legal community for this reason. Okay, you can jump to the next slide, David. So here's a couple of, I've just picked a couple of quotes from some thought leaders out there that cover a swath here, starting with the National AI Center in New South Wales, Australia. It talks about, and most of these quotes really touch on that notion of AI, trustworthy AI, responsible AI. This is sort of not only important from a compliance standpoint, but also as a competitive advantage. Data quality, as I mentioned on the previous slide, is also taking center stage. And then finally, just sort of the safeguards and guardrails, the importance of those from an overall credibility and reliability standpoint, reputationally. The legal community is at the forefront of this, from keeping your customers safe, but also protecting your own approaches to this as you go forward. So I really do think that there's a very interesting trend here and a very interesting through line with AI legal and regulations. So that sort of underscores the what we're seeing in AI through the legal community and through eDiscovery. But now let's touch a little bit on some of the elements of how we have to think about these things. And the first and foremost, in-your-face part of this is regulation. The interesting thing I find about regulation is that it's across the board, it is not consistent. So one of the things that's going to keep the legal community and, of course, everyone else on on high alert, if you will, is this idea of trying to figure out which regulations make the most sense. You'll notice that sort of the National Industry of Standards and Technology, NIST, is more of a framework, and it's more guidelines and volunteer approach, although there are a number of executive orders coming in from states like Virginia, Utah, California. So not only do we have it at a national to nation level, but in the United States, state by state, there's this patchwork of regulation. So one of the challenges we have is understanding which ones make the most sense to listen to pay attention to, and the legal community is right in the heart of helping to navigate that. The European Union, obviously, is the first and foremost to come out with an act on AI that is the most prominent and progressive, forward-leaning, some would say the most aggressive. What's interesting about that is they really have taken more of a threat level approach to it. So keep your eye on that. But I think I added this one to the right here. This is a one-year-old article talking about how Italy has, has concerns about ChatGPT and them not complying to European privacy laws. This is 1 year ago. And this article talks about how OpenAI is offering remedies to solve that issue. That issue is still burning hot today, and even has some recent articles about how there are still very strong challenges with that. So I put this on here because it's 1 year old. It's still a hot issue today, meaning, folks, that we are just at the beginning of this process of emerging regulations, meeting the rapidly changing AI technologies. The pressure on all of us to reduce costs and to leverage technology to mitigate that, measured against the risks that we face. So again, I find it fascinating that you folks effectively are in the midst of all of this and center stage in this entire process. So that sets the groundwork. And basically what I put here is that I see the European Union, the AI Act, as GDPR 2.0. But I do think that it's going to actually be much faster than GDPR. That took some time for people to get on board. You already see the Brussels effect taking place. And I think even those who are digging in with trying to stick with more voluntary approaches are going to find that they get dragged into following along with what the EU AI Act is saying. So it'll be very interesting to watch that as it goes. So I think as we turn the tide, I want to go back to this notion of trust. I like this quote because it really sets the stage. The true test of AI is not in its intelligence, but its ability to earn and maintain the trust of those it serves. And so with that as a foundation, I'd like to talk about how Nuix has established our own principles, our own AI principles. And these are sort of the foundational aspects of our AI policy. This is how we've approached it. It doesn't mean that every company should approach it this way, but I thought it was important as part of this presentation today to talk about how we came about these and why they're important. So first and foremost, why are principles important? Well, they, again, create the foundation for the mindset and the behavior your organization will take when it comes to AI. The policies will flow from these, as well as the ongoing governance and the way that you actually apply these and operationalize them. So it's helpful to understand how you go about this process, and maybe folks that you can help with your customers to do this, but you can also help internally take some of this on. So we selected these 5 principles, and the reason why we selected these is because we found that many of the principles out there that you see overlap with existing corporate governance, like things like accountability, security, data privacy. Much of that is baked into the ones that we selected, but we didn't put them separate because we wanted to make sure that we focused on a number that made sense, but also that each of them are much more than aspirational, but they're demonstrable through the system that we provide. So I think it was important to point that out. So we have this explainability, which I think gets us to trust. Explainability, I will get to each of these in following slides. Accessibility is about that human control. Specificity, being focused and targeted. fairness and safety around the ethics and reliable outcomes that we're looking to get here. So I think you can move to the next slide here, David. I do want to point out here that at the core, speaking of legal, at the core of our AI governance is one of our leaders in our organization, Alona Meyer, and she is our general counsel. And so what I really appreciate about that is that we're taking this at a very high level, very seriously from a legal compliance standpoint. So also as part of that team, we have our data privacy officer, our risk officer, and our ethics committee. So again, I want to just go to the core here, which is at the heart of your AI policies and principles. There should be this kind of leadership buy-in. And that, again, I go back to that legal thread around compliance is really, really important. So this is not a technical issue. It's deeply embedded in legal, compliance, and governance. So as we look at each of these, I'll take you through them, briefly, but explainability is important because it provides visibility into both the training sets. How was the data built? What was the data that it was built on? So that data governance, as well as how the results were achieved. So the predictions that were outcomes of the technology. So if you would sit someone in front of our UI, our model builder, a regulator, a litigator, anybody that needs to understand, they would be able to, in plain English, understand what's happening with the models, what's causing them to do that, and access the data that was used to build the model. So it's really important as far as generating trust in what we're doing. The next is around accessibility. And I think this is really key. You don't see the need for accessibility, or you don't see accessibility as a principle from very many AI companies. And we're unique here because we really believe that if you can allow a lay person in, or a business person, or a subject matter expert into the process and understand what the system is doing, what it's saying, and you also give them the controls over the knobs and dials and levers, you're really extending that level of explainability and trust and control that really drives a lot of the credibility, if you will, the defensibility of the system. So it's really providing that under the hood view here. And you can see all the different ways, just a couple of screenshots here of our system, but throughout our system, the ability to access and modify and use our domain expertise to really change these things, as opposed to requiring AI, the IT team or highly technical people to be the ones with the keys to the castle, so to speak. So this gives that level of human control. The next is around specificity, and this is really big when it comes to sort of in that comparison to the generative AI world. Generative AI is coming, and it's going to make a big difference in how we are able to brainstorm and add value to the review process in terms of document summarization, privilege, sentiment, and all of that stuff. It's going to deepen and in many ways mature the way in which we generate outcome and automate that process. But it's also riddled with challenges. And so the goal here isn't to hit everything as if it's, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. There is so much you can do. And I've heard this over and over again from best practices is how can you reduce the size of the models? So that when the world is going big in these giant language models, that is amazing to do certain tasks. But it's not for everything. And you can do quite a bit with very, very small models, which you can actually put behind your firewall. You can build them on CPUs versus GPUs. And also by reducing those data sets and the model sizes, you can reduce your risk because you're putting less data out there. So you can be more focused, more accurate, reduce your risk, and generate more intended outcomes using more traditional approaches. So that's what we mean about specificity, is allowing you, depending on the use case, to be as narrow or broad as you need to, anything from generative all the way back to very targeted use cases. And we believe that's very important to give the customer that level of flexibility. And then we obviously touch on two very important things. There's safety and fairness. Is just crucial. And so this concept of data privacy around making sure the models, you understand where your data is coming from, that you have authorization and to use and consent to use the data that you use, that you expose the data to a bias reporting and analysis, and the ability to remove bias when found. Data anonymization, so removing the identification either through encryption or just replacement. And obviously, again, focusing on the security aspect of the technology creates that kind of resilience and reliability that you're looking for. So really, this is at the core of the ethics and accountability side of the governance. So those are the key elements within our practice. Those are our principles, and they sit at the foundation of our AI policies and AI governance. And again, I think this is where that kind of ties to the legal community, because I do see this as critical to everything that your customers are dealing with each and every day is going to require this level, because let's face it, AI is going to permeate the market quite broadly. So with that, I think I just leave you with one final quote here, and it's from our former chairman, Jeffrey Bleich, who is now also at he's also the head of he's a legal policy officer at Cruise, which is a self-driving car company. But he had a brilliant statement at our conference last year, and it's the greatest source of all human security is trust. And again, I wanted to circle back on that trust issue because it's not just important for business. It's really important as the social fabric and society in general. And with AI coming in, with you being the legal experts and with regulatory and societal pressures, it all comes down to this combination. And that's why I think this topic around eDiscovery, legal and AI is so crucial because really you folks are center stage here in the legal community as the center of this storm that we're all swimming in. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, David, and to kind of close us out.
Awesome, thank you. So just to end this, I want to wrap this up. A couple things. So why Nuix at a high level? So we have basically the best processing engine that's out there. We can deal with many data sources. We understand data better than anyone else, and we have the ability to access that data in ways that other entities can't, and at speed that they can't access that. In terms of what we've built, what technologies we've invested in, what we've acquired, we have an end-to-end EDRM one-stop shop. You can go from legal hold to surveys, to collections, to processing the data, to doing your EDA, to doing your ECA, to promoting it to a review platform, all within the same platform, and synchronize those calls that are made in that review platform back to the original source behind the corporate firewall, right? We basically have all of the technology, and we're investing in AI, but we're doing it with a purpose. We're very targeted in what we're doing, but you're going to see the same types of technologies that you're hearing about everyone else coming out. We're working on them as well, right? So basically, we're going to apply the right AI technology where where clients are going to receive the most cost benefit at the right level, and then empower our users to do that. And the way that we're going to empower them, the main thing is through enterprise orchestration, right? Automating the task. Taking the person who describes their life as copying files and change it to I build discrete workflows that manage the flow of data. And then I focus my efforts on taking on large problems like reducing costs or improving quality or reducing risk in terms of the data that's going out. That's what we want to do. We want to empower those experts. We want to change what they do. We don't want them to set their alarm clock at 2 a.m. to wake up to, talk to a vendor to make sure the data has been FTP'd over, right? To then have somebody else copy it to a hard drive, right? That's not where we want to go. We want to get away from that. And finally, the main thing here is being able to deploy it your way, right? We have hybrid deployment. We have SaaS only clients. We have clients who have everything behind the firewall. We have clients who have systems that are behind their firewall, and they're using our SaaS platform for legal. So, our goal is to support our clients with where they're at in their cloud journey. But oftentimes, our clients can't put the data in the cloud. They just can't. It's just not that type of data. So we support the entire spectrum, and it's our goal to meet our clients where they're at in terms of what their capabilities are and what their needs are. So that wraps it up for me. Any final words, Michael?
Yeah, no, fantastic presentation. Thanks for being with us today. And thanks everyone for joining us on the ACEDS webinar channel. Thank you, David. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, of course, to our partner, Nuix. You can learn more about Nuix at nuix.com. And please visit aceds.org for a complete list of all our upcoming programs. Have a great day, everyone, and be kind to one another.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.